In the fall of 1994, Micheal Cremo, co-author with Richard Thompson of the highly controversial book, The Hidden History of the Human Race, embarked on a 3-month nationwide television and radio tour to publicize their work. At the same time, a highly rated nationwide television program was aired dealing directly with the theme of their book. In the last 150 years, a mass of scientific evidence proving that people like ourselves existed millions of years ago has been systematically suppressed by the scientific establishment. The following are excerpts from these shows viewed or heard by more than 20 million people.
Why would thousands of artifacts be ignored by mainstream archaeology? They show the unthinkable. Images of man battling with dinosaurs. Reptilian creatures interacting with men and women. Ancient inscriptions on stones depicting complex surgical procedures. And carved metallic spheres found in rock strata 2.8 billion years old. This evidence points to one conclusion, that the history of life on this planet may be radically different than what is accepted today. In this program, The Forbidden History of Man, we will examine documented evidence which suggests that our theory of evolution needs to be completely revised. Much of this evidence has been known for hundreds of years, but it's been ignored because it directly contradicts theories which are universally accepted. We will hear reports from a new breed of scientists who have been labeled heretics for daring to challenge fundamental scientific theories. In their controversial book, Forbidden Archaeology, Micheal Cremo and Dr. Richard Thompson have revealed a major scientific cover-up. Since the beginning of archaeology, researchers have found bones and artifacts showing humans like us existed hundreds of millions of years ago. But according to Thompson, these discoveries have been suppressed, and we have come to accept a picture of prehistory that is largely incorrect. Thompson and Cremo have documented hundreds of cases which tell a gripping story of a scientific world shrouded in conspiracy and deception.
And welcome back to 43 Focus, and please welcome Micheal Cremo, who is the co-author of this book, The Hidden History of the Human Race. Nice to see you, Micheal.
Good to be here, Gary.
This, I believe, calls into question Darwinian's theory of evolution. Is that correct?
Yes, Gary. Essentially, that theory says that human beings like us have been around for about 100,000 years, and before that you would have had only ape-man-like creatures, before that apes and monkeys. What we found, however, when we looked into the entire history of archaeology, my co-author and I did 8 years of research. We looked at every archaeological discovery that's ever been made, and what we found is that there are hundreds of such discoveries that indicate human beings like ourselves have been around for literally millions of years.
What's been the reception to this book?
Oh, there's been, from the spokespersons of the scientific establishment, there has been absolute outrage. For example,
how dare you come up with any kind of...
Well, like Richard Leakey, for example, he said this book is pure humbug, nobody would take it seriously but a fool. On the other hand, we've had many scientists and scholars say this is a wonderful book. It's really great that finally somebody has brought together all this evidence, because a lot of it's not available in English. We had to do 8 years of research, translate papers from German, Russian.
You referred to in India the Vedic literature?
Well, yes, I was saying in the beginning that we do take our inspiration from these ancient Sanskrit writings of India. They're collectively called the Vedas. Among them are the Puranas. Purana is a Sanskrit word. It means history. Now, these histories tell of human civilizations on this planet going back millions of years.
How do we know those are accurate?
Well, that was our question, too. Richard Thompson and I, we thought, well, if if there's any accuracy to those statements, there must be some factual evidence to back them up. Now, when we looked in the current textbooks, of course, we didn't find any such evidence, but we thought, well, let's look a little bit further. And as I said, that led to an 8-year research program where we investigated every archaeological discovery ever made. And what we found is that, practically speaking, archaeologists and anthropologists have buried almost as much evidence as they've dug up. In other words,
or perhaps overlooked, cast aside.
Well, yes, cast aside, and there have been some outright cases of suppression where people who have reported such things have had their careers ruined.
We should never, I don't think, be afraid to investigate opposing points of view, and the hidden history of the human race is something that is in direct opposition, I guess, to the Darwinian theory of evolution.
This human person who looked like us, existed millions of years ago, did not evolve from an ape, as we are led to believe in the Darwin theory. Why has this evidence been suppressed, and what kind of evidence have you found to support this?
Well, I'll give you a very good example. Now, one example from historical times is during the California Gold Rush days, miners were digging tunnels thousands of feet into the sides of mountains. Now, the rock in these mountains is over 10 million years old. So when they were digging these tunnels, they were finding human skeletons, they were finding stone spear points, they were finding mortars and pestles, hundreds of them at dozens of locations. Now, all these were gathered together, reported to the scientific world by J.D. Whitney, who was the state geologist of California. And he published a massive book about them by Harvard University. Harvard University was the publisher. Now, what happened to these artifacts? Why aren't they on display in museums? Why aren't our children taught about them in schools? There was a very powerful anthropologist at the Smithsonian Institution named William H. Holmes. And he said to Whitney, you, Dr. Whitney, if you had understood the theory of human evolution as we understand it today, you would have hesitated to announce your conclusion, namely that human beings existed millions of years ago, despite the imposing array of facts with which you were confronted. In other words, simply because the facts didn't fit the theory, the facts had to go, and so did Professor Whitney.
But back then I would imagine that they did not have the scientific procedures to identify the exact age of bones and matter that we have today. So can you be confident that this researcher was able to give a time for these bones that were found?
Yes, we checked with the modern geologists about the age of the deposits. Mm-hmm. Now, these things continue to be discovered today, for example. And a vast amount of evidence showing that human beings like ourselves have been around for millions of years has been systematically suppressed. And I can give you some examples. For example, in 1979, Mary Leakey, who's one of the most famous archaeologists of this century, discovered in Africa completely modern human footprints, no different from the footprints that you or I would make on a beach today. Now, the thing about these footprints is they were found in rock that was dated 3.6 million years old. And that throws out completely any idea of human origins that's current today.
Why would anyone want information like that suppressed? What possible advantage would there be in that?
Well, power, prestige, money, there's a lot riding on it. If even one of the hundreds of cases that we document in the hidden history of the human race were found to be true, accepted, that would mean that everything we've been told about human origins and antiquity for the past 150 years is simply not true. And I don't think that the current establishment is ready to admit that.
How long ago do you think that this evidence was suppressed? I mean, is this something that's been going on for years and years?
Yes, this has been going on for about 150 years. I'll give you another example. In the
Following what it is that you have uncovered from other people's findings in this type of thing, do you believe that man existed with the dinosaur, for example, to give people a general idea of how to pinpoint?
Right, that's a very good question, Michelle. And from the evidence that we've uncovered, we have some very good reports
reports of a human presence even before the time of the dinosaurs. For example, in the 1840s, there was a scientific magazine called The Geologist, and it reported that in Macoupin County, Illinois, which is right here in North America, in the United States, a human skeleton, just like ours, had been uncovered in a coal mine, in solid coal, 90 feet deep underneath the ground. Now, Richard Thompson and I were able to discover from the reports exactly where that occurred. And we talked to the Geological Survey of the state of Illinois, and we asked them, well, how old is the coal there? And it turned out it was 300 million years old, which means it's older than the Jurassic, that word everybody knows now, that refers to the dinosaurs. In other words, it was older than the age of the dinosaurs.
Wow. Okay, so that throws a whole new spin on it.
Yes, indeed it does. And some of the scientists who have read the book have obviously recognized that. For example, William Howells, who is one of the big anthropologists of this century, one of the architects of the current paradigm, he said, well, if what you say here is true, it more or less throws a monkey wrench into our whole picture of how life originated on this planet. And I think it does.
Something you alluded to a few moments ago I want to bring up again. You talked about man coexisting with apes and coexisting with another kind of ape-man creature, and you again mentioned North America, and I think, of course, there's always been a lot of interest in Bigfoot, which is essentially where this is coming from. Some of the information that you brought forward is that this is just a descendant of this same wild man creature that was existing years ago.
That's a distinct possibility. Now, when I first heard about this subject, I was extremely skeptical. But what turned me around is when I began to read reports about these creatures by very well-respected anthropologists. For example, Grover S. Kratz, who's at the University of Washington, up in the Northwest. He has extensively studied the footprints of these creatures, and he says they're biologically convincing. There is no possible way that they could have been hoaxed, and he's pretty well convinced that these creatures do exist. So that's the sort of thing that convinced me that there is a very good chance that they're there, and that from the descriptions of these creatures, they seem to match very well some of the descriptions that we get of the ape-man-like creatures that supposedly existed millions of years ago.
Okay. So, but yet we keep coming around to the same thing. People just don't want to believe it. They just, like you said, well, they're skeptical. They go, oh, no, that's just a hoax. They're not hearing the information that noted scientists are finding.
Well, all we really wanted to do in our book is put the facts on the table, all of them, not just the facts that you will see in the current textbooks, but all of the facts that are relevant to this whole subject, and let people draw their own conclusions.
One of the questions that I first came up with when I was reading the book that you did answer in the book that I'd like you to explain was that I said, well, gee, don't we have all these machines now that can look at the footprints or the bones or whatever, and that will just tell us how old it is?
Oh, this is a very common perception. We have such faith in technology and those who employ it that when we hear about things like carbon-14 testing or potassium-argon testing, we think it really is a very simple process, almost like you pop something in the microwave and boom, it comes out. It's not like that at all. These are very complicated procedures. What I found in practice is that scientists may run several tests on the same piece of bone. Some of the ages will be very great, some very small, and they will tend to pick the date to publish in their scientific literature that most fits the idea that they start out with about how old the fossil should be. Now that often happens.
What do scientists and researchers have to gain by distorting their findings? I mean, you would think that if they found if they truly think that they found evidence of man pre-existing the dates that we take for granted right now, that they would want to be published, that they would want people to hear about this, that they would get their name up in lights, as it were, as making this remarkable discovery. Why is this so suppressed?
Well, there are tremendous pressures for conformity within the scientific community. For example, for every academic post that opens up, every professorship that opens up in an American university, there are generally hundreds of applicants. And it does not help your reputation if you go reporting things that should not be reported. It could be very bad for one's reputation. And in our book, we document several cases of that. For example, Virginia Steen McIntyre. She's a geologist who I personally know. She lives in Colorado now. She went to Mexico in the 1970s, and she was a geologist with the U.S. Geological Survey. She dated a site there where some human artifacts have been found at 300,000 years. Mm-hmm. All her test results showed that that was the age of that site. But because that went against the dominant idea that human beings have only been in North America for 30,000 years, she said she was not able to get the report published. She was labeled a publicity seeker and a maverick in her community of scholars, and she said she eventually lost a professorship that she held at an American university because of this, and hasn't been able to work as a geologist since. Now, this is not the normal picture that we have of how science works, but unfortunately, these are the sorts of things that can happen, and these are the sorts of pressures that can be applied in order to keep a certain view intact.
Mm-hmm. So what do people need to do now? They apparently, we need the public to open their minds up a little bit more to alternative ideas to what we've been taught.
Well, I think one thing we need to do is develop a little bit more of a healthy skepticism towards pronouncements from spokespersons from the scientific community. Just as we've learned not to accept without question every pronouncement that may come from the press secretary of a politician or the public relations office of a corporation. We may want to dig a little further, keep an open mind, have some healthy skepticism, and I think perhaps we've placed spokespersons from the scientific community on a little bit of a pedestal, and we may need to give them the same sort of treatment that we would give to spokespersons from other groups in society.
The Bible answers the riddle of our origin in 4 simple words: and God created man. Darwin looked at monkeys and saw Michelangelo. But for modern anthropologists who try to put a name and a date to the dawn of humankind, the answer is constantly changing. Fossils discovered recently in Ethiopia put our earliest ancestors at around 4.4 million years, but some scientists believe that there is evidence that we are much older than that. On an archaeological dig in Hueyatlico, Mexico, Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre discovered tools that predated the earliest known humans. Her find created a storm of controversy.
I don't really want to be in the center of a controversy. I never asked to be in the center of a controversy, but I'm here, and doggone it, I want to get the information out. I want to get at the truth. I guess that's what it is.
Why does Dr. Steen McIntyre feel the need to protect her artifacts from her more mainstream colleagues? Why are contradictory findings being met with contempt instead of excitement? Some researchers charge it's because these new findings would turn modern anthropology on its head.
Welcome back to Talkin' Pittsburgh. Nice to have you with us. And this next segment should prove very interesting to you. How old are we? I mean, as a race. How old are human beings? How long have we been on the face of the earth? Well, science says one thing, and this book, The Hidden History of the Human Race, says a major scientific cover-up is
exposed and it claims that scientists are sort of hiding things. Micheal Cremo is an author and researcher specializing in the history and philosophy of science, and he, along with Richard Thompson, incidentally, Richard Thompson got his PhD in mathematics from Cornell University. Micheal Cremo, what is your background? More in journalism?
I'm an investigative writer.
Investigative writer. You know, right. You did most of the writing.
Most of the writing and investigation.
I have to give you credit for this. Here's one testimonial that says, "Hidden History is a detective novel as much as a scholarly tour de force. The murderer is not the butler, neither is the victim, a rich old man with many heirs. The victim is man himself, and the role of the assassin is played by numerous scientists." That's in talking about this book. And down here, this is where I give you credit. You put in here, here's another testimonial. Your book is pure humbug and does not deserve to be taken seriously by anyone but a fool. That's an anthropologist who represents the scientific establishment viewpoint. Where do you differ with the scientific establishment in this book?
Well, you're right. This book is causing shockwaves in the scientific community, and where we differ is, let's just put the facts on the table and look at them and see how they've been dealt with. Now I can give you another example.
Yeah, there is one thing, though. Yeah. Your scientific delvings, if you will, have to be tempered, as anyone's is, by their own feelings.
Yes.
Now, you are a member of the Hare Krishna Society, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, as is your co-author.
That's true.
Okay, you could have an ulterior, well, even if you were trying not to.
Right.
Now, Hare Krishna believes in whole souls, right? I mean, we have been here for forever.
Yes. Now, yes, I am a member of the Bhakti Granta Institute, which is the science studies branch of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And we do take some inspiration from the Vedic literatures of India, which do contain accounts of human civilizations being present on this planet millions of years ago. But my point would be, if archaeology is actually science, then it shouldn't matter, what your motive is. It's like bowling. Bowl a strike. Who cares if you're doing it for this reason or another? I mean, facts are facts. Now, the facts that
statistics can be distorted for whichever way someone wants them to be distorted. We know that.
Right.
You and I could take the same statistic and change it around and make it look different.
So let's look at them. And on the other hand, other people, and I think we've documented this in the book, that there is a commitment to this idea that we have a recent origin on this planet that is itself biasing the presentation of the
Let me
facts.
tell folks, if they want to learn more about what you've written about, The Hidden History of the Human Race is the book. And this is Micheal Cremo. I thank you so much for being with us. We have run out of time. And
pleasure that I've been here, Ron.
Very nice to have you with us. Check it out if you're interested in the history of man and find out if you're 1 million years old, 2 million years old, or just 100,000. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend. Stay tuned now for Della Cruz. She'll be along in just a few moments.
I'd like to move along here in some of the additional myths that you have listed here, Micheal Cremo. You have talked in terms of the fact that scientists don't cheat. That's a myth. You say there's actual cheating going on.
Oh, that's very well documented. For example, the Piltdown case is a very famous case that documents that. Now, what that has to do with is early in this century, there was a purported discovery of an ape man in England based on a skull and a jawbone. And this Piltdown ape man, was in the science textbooks for about 40 years. And then suddenly it was revealed that the British Museum had tested these fossils and determined that it was a very elaborate hoax. And many people have speculated about the identity of the person who was the hoaxer, and practically all of them center on different scientists in England, such as Sir Grafton Elliot Smith or Sir Arthur Smith Woodward, all very well established scientist in England, because only somebody who knew the scientific method very well could have prepared these fossils in such a way that they would have fooled the scientific community all around the world for 40 or 50 years. So some scientist who wanted to perhaps give some evidence in favor of evolution, because there's not very much of it, invented this ape man, and in a very sophisticated way cheated, literally. And this is admitted by the scientists themselves. And there are more examples I could give, and we document many of them in our book, The Hidden History of the Human Race.
Myth number 3, Michael, that you have written, evidence that goes against human evolution is reported only by crackpots.
Now this is one of the standard techniques that the scientific community tries to use against anybody that reports something that goes against their ideas. They try to label them in a derogatory way without actually discussing the facts. And I think we've all had experience of that. But the real facts is that actual scientists have, over the past 150 years, reported many astounding facts that go against the theory of evolution. And the present scientific community doesn't want people to know that. They want to promote the idea that anybody that's against evolution is somehow or other a religious fanatic, a crackpot, but it's simply not true. And I've personally met scientists who have discovered some of these things, and what happens to them is it's very unfair, the treatment to which they are subjected.
Okay, we're going to go to Anton in Brookfield, Wisconsin. Anton, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Your comment.
I've often wondered how the perfect complementary male-female systems of reproduction could have evolved from unintelligent life forms.
You know, Anton, not only is that a good question, but also the point is if evolution occurred, it'd have to be simultaneous evolution of both species at the same time. Right. Because if it took 1 million years for the female to evolve, it would have kind of messed up the whole procreation thing, wouldn't it?
Right. That's my question.
Good question. Stay right there. Micheal Cremo, your response.
Well, I would like to put together a book called Darwin's Fairy Tales. And I think that would be one of them. You can just look at so many examples of complex structures and behaviors in different creatures, whether it's how the spider learned to spin its web, or how our human reproduction system came about, or any of these things. They're a complete mystery. They're not explained even theoretically by the evolutionist, and what they do is, when they want to explain anything, they just wave their magic wand and say, it happened by evolution. And that's why I call it Darwin's Fairy Tales.
Well, I think it's time to begin to look at the implications of all of this. I can assure our audience that you have hundreds of similar cases, and obviously you are inspired by a religious tradition, as we mentioned earlier. You're a student of the Hindu Vedantic tradition. Right. It's very different than the Christian Jewish fundamentalist tradition that insists on a divine creation that occurred some 5,000 years ago. The Hindu view of time is not linear as Western, as we Westerners conceive of time. It doesn't start with a big bang and end with a whimper.
Right.
It's cyclical, isn't it?
Yes. The basic pattern is cyclical. And this is actually the subject of a presentation I shall be making in New Delhi to the World Archaeological Congress called Puranic Time and the Archaeological Record. Mm-hmm. And the concept of time that you do find in the Puranas is, in fact, cyclical. Now, what might one predict from that? Say if you have civilizations coming and going over vast periods of time, perhaps you might have humans and other ape-man-like creatures coexisting. I will mention that the Puranas do talk about intelligent races of ape-like creatures that use stone tools. This is not an idea that came in with Darwin. It's been there for thousands of years. Now, what might one predict from that? If you were to predict what archaeologists might find, you would say, well, they would tend to find a very bewildering mixture of anatomically modern human fossils, ape-man-like fossils, crude stone tools, articles indicative of a higher level of culture, all sort of mixed up and going back, hundreds of millions of years. I think you might also predict that given the biases of investigators towards a linear progressive idea of time, with things beginning in a very simple state and progressing in a linear fashion to a more advanced state, that they might edit that record to conform to their linear progressive biases. And indeed, both predictions we found in our investigations do come true. You actually do have that very bewildering mixture of advanced artifacts and bones mixed up with more primitive ones going back hundreds of millions of years. And you also do find a very systematic editing of this record to conform to a linear, progressive, you might call it evolutionary view of things, which is quite amazing.
Of course, if we have this sort of cyclical picture, circular picture of things, much of conventional science will need to be readjusted, and naturally, I suppose it's only fair to say that Vedantic thought has many other ideas about the nature of time and space, the nature of spiritual dimensions. I believe that your view of things would be that rather than say that humanity evolved from simple celled creatures, that in some sense we rather descended from spiritual planes.
Yes, and this is a matter that...
Ron in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Ron, how are you?
Yes, good evening. I'm just going to make a question here and then hang up and listen. Obviously, your two guests do not believe that we evolved from lower primates.
And interestingly enough, one of them comes from a Judeo-Christian background and one not.
Right. Now my question is, if we did not, then where do you two people feel we did come from? And I'd like some hard evidence of a Garden of Eden. Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, this is the subject matter of the next book that Richard Thompson and I are working on. We call it Human Devolution because from the evidence that we can see, it appears that if our origin is not on this planet, we did not evolve from apes on this planet. We come from a higher spiritual dimension of reality. There is creation involved. We have a relation with a supreme spiritual being, and that is what the actual evidence suggests. Now, to make a scientific case for that, we have to, first of all, show that there is more to reality.
Educated. We are very thoroughly educated. We Americans can't find their own country on a map. They're ignorant, they're ill-informed, they're unread, they're pompous and arrogant, self-centered, and egotistical. They're given to silliness, and it's just a horrible, horrible place to have to now operate in if you have a spirit and if you are intellectually inclined and spiritually inclined and have feelings. America is a horrible place to have to live now. And so there are so many good people here who do have great spirits and who do have a care for their families and human race. And they are confined to have to live now in a country that has no soul whatsoever. America is soulless. It has no value in anything. It's an incredible place to live today when you can talk to people about something of importance to the human family, and people will just look at you and stare at you.
Yeah.
Like you're some kind of a strange picture on the wall. They don't even know what you're talking about.
That's right.
And so that's why I today am in a horrible place in my life. Because I've spent my entire life studying, reading, researching, comparing notes. I've got hundreds of bank boxes in storage of handwritten notes. I've got about 30 bank boxes of just handwritten notes on every subject that's conceivable in the human mind. Everything I could get my hands on was reading and studying and questioning. And today, after all of that 50 years of that kind of study, and specifically in the areas of religion, theology, occult theology, and government, today I am locked into a country that people look at me like an oddity. When I talk about my subject in public, people look at me as if I must be from another world. Well, I figured out a long time ago what it amounts to, what my situation is. If you, as a normal human being, happen by chance to be invited to go for a tour of an insane asylum, and you're roaming around the grounds of that institution, which is filled with mentally disordered people who have to be locked up because they're mentally unstable, and retarded, and you walk through that facility and spend the day talking to people, everybody in that facility knows each other. Everyone in that facility has lived together with everyone else, and so they all have their little eccentricities, and they're all on the same level of mentally disordered, but they all get along together. They're all together, and they live together, so they're not, they don't have any problem living with each other. But you, as an outsider, you show up as an outsider, talking and asking them questions about science, religion, philosophy, government, and commerce, intelligent things that intelligent people would discuss, and they will all, in the institution, look at you like you're mentally deranged because you don't fit.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's happening in America. People like myself don't fit. And my fellow Americans look at me as if I'm some kind of a monstrosity. They have no idea in the world what I'm talking about. Secret societies, Illuminati, and international high finance, and the manipulation of the human race, and how religion and occult philosophies manipulate our minds, and how they're manipulating great nations into wars, etc.
That's right.
And so.
Well, I totally agree with you, Jordan, and I personally believe that this is also now a worldwide plague, if you will, in that sense, that this is not at all restricted to America. This is in Europe, it is in other parts of the world. I personally obviously witness and see this every day in this former country called Sweden that now has sold itself over to the European Union and is going to change its own constitution going in here in 2011. And everything is, over in terms of, anything that has to do with the nation of Sweden anymore. But that's a side issue. This is a worldwide plague, basically. And the question here that you mentioned, that you bring up here about this transformation that has taken place of the human being is an interesting one. It's a pertinent one to talk about. It is basically news items is revealed almost every day now that supports this particular theory. BBC talked the other day of the fact that they now have been able to change people's moral judgment by disrupting a certain area of the brain with magnetic pulses. Another news item came out. J. Craig Venter, the guy who's behind the Human Genome Project, has now created synthetic life, first time successfully, a cell have now been able to be programmed by a computer, and this now can go around in its own environment and reprogram other cells. So this is called a new life form, and it's called Synthia. Is this what you're talking about? The scientific dictatorship, the technological singularity, transhumanism, right?
That's it. That's precisely what I'm talking about. Exactly, because I know I've sat and talked with physicists, scientists, astronauts. I have many friends in the government and industry and in the science community especially. I'm a member of certain scientific groups, and I sit and listen to these people who are explaining how the human mind works, how the stimuli is scientifically put together. To one day, it's not. Let me go back and say that if you're the captain of an oil tanker, one of the largest ships in the world, you cannot manipulate that ship like you do a Volkswagen. You can't run it like a car. You have to plan 20 miles ahead of time where you're going to direct that ship, because it has weight, momentum. It is too large to turn quickly, so you really have to know what you're doing if you're going to be a captain of an oil tanker or a captain of a great seafaring boat. So you have to know what you're doing and plan 15 to 20 miles ahead of time to where you want to be. Well, the same thing is happening today. The people who are manipulating the human race have already planned this as far back as the turn of the century in the 1890s. There were already scientific people talking about the manipulation of the human psyche, the human mind, and redoing the whole human race. Classic example of some of the most brilliant people on the earth, and some of the most awesomely evil people on the earth, but extraordinarily brilliant people. The whole Nazi movement about the eugenics, and incidentally, eugenics, the Nazism and eugenics did not start in Germany. It had nothing to do with the Nazi people. It had nothing to do with the German people.
That's right.
Eugenics started in America. It started right here in Southern California, is where the concept of eugenics began, is right here in Los Angeles. And I can actually show you, it was large articles a few years ago in the Los Angeles Times talking about where did the concept of eugenics and the superior race of humans being developed on the earth, where did that come from? Well, it came from actually in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, is where it was actually developed to start with. And from here, it fled into Europe, and from Europe, it set up the whole concept now for the whole world. But it was developed right here in Los Angeles, not by the Nazis, not by the German people at all. It was developed here in Los Angeles. So when I know that, and I understand who these people are, what they're doing, and what their long vision for the future, like a ship's captain, they have planned this a long time ago, before your parents were born. This was already on the board to be worked on, and this kind of knowledge is on a need-to-know basis, and the guys who are running this planet figure you don't need to know. You just go and watch your basketball and your sports and your soccer and drink your beer and stay out of the way, because somebody is manipulating and directing the whole human race into a hole. We are all going under. Our earth is under arrested development. People all over the world can't even think anymore. They just go with the flow, you know. So that's number one. I got plenty of other problems.
There's plenty of problems out there, but if I put it this way, then Jordan, even now in this day, this current age, the era we're in right now, it also seems like even the few little freedoms that humanity has, experienced during its brief little, time here, even they are now beginning to wane, of course, and we don't.
Of course.
the banking system is collapsing. People don't even have the money to go to the basketball game anymore, or the hockey, football game, what have you. It's tight to buy the beer that goes along with that, if you know what I mean. Things are changing.
Yeah, but I always tell Americans who say things like that, but that's okay, because in the concentration camps you're going into very soon, I'm sure they'll have football for you, because on all the prisons today in America, at least they have TV, and so you can watch football and basketball in prison.
Yeah.
So even if you won't get the cold beer, but at least you'll be able to sit there and vegetate and watch football if you're in a federal prison or in concentration camps like we have in America. We got concentration camps all over this country, just waiting, but they're quietly letting us have one more holiday, but they're waiting very, very patiently, and very soon Americans are going to be going in and wholesale into concentration camps, into prisons, and the entire world is going to awake and find out that there is no hope for the human race. It's over. It's finished. The masters who own the human race, who feel that they own the human race and where we're going in our future, they're going to be, it's just going to be an iron boot in the face of humanity. So,
how responsible do you feel that we, as global, if you will, then citizens are in this process as well? Because it could be argued, of course, and there's two different stances on this. One is that we are participatory in it because we've allowed it to happen. Another stance on this is, no, we've actually been manipulated into this position. We've been progressively or slowly indoctrinated and dumbed down. Meaning that at this point we just lack the proper skills to see through this charade, to understand what actually is going on. But
well, there is such a thing called community responsibility in law, and there is a basis for the idea of community responsibility, meaning that you have let things happen. You have gone along with it. You were too concerned with your basketball game and your football game and Paris Hilton and all your silly nonsense that you live with in your sports and all that, and so you allowed things to happen. And the idea was someone quoted during the Second World War that when they came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't care. And when they came for the Protestants, I'm not a Protestant, so nothing to me. And when they came for this group or that group, I wasn't in that group, so what do I care? Well, finally, they came for me. And so the idea was that when you see things happening and you don't care because it really doesn't affect you and your home and your little area of the town that you live in, so why bother? Well, one day what goes around comes around. It will be your turn. And when it's your turn, everyone else in the world will be too busy to care one way or the other about what's happening to, in fact, you and your town. So don't look for the rest of the world to stand up and demand the protection and rights for you, because you never give a damn about anybody else when they want their rights to be taken. And so, there is something to be said for this idea of community responsibility. We just go along and get along. And we hope that it won't happen to us. Okay, so it's happening to the Jews, but thank God I'm not Jewish. Or later on it's happening to blacks, but thank God I'm not black, so it's not happening to me. Well, one day it's going to happen to you. And when it does, there will be no Jews or blacks or Protestants or anybody else to come help you.
Well, that's
that's what I see.
Well, it's. I think we can begin, maybe to see the increments of this now at the start of it. I mean, for a while here now, then, since 2001, since the official lies about 9/11, since the official, excuses about going into other countries, like the UK, the US, even Sweden has troops in Afghanistan, etc. People might have been okay, I guess, if you know what I mean by the idea that Muslims are being harassed in that sense. But now things are changing on that level too. If we look at this recent TSA debacle in the United States, where we now have people without turbans, without Muhammad as a middle name, being harassed, if you will, for these very things that the Muslims previously have been accused of carrying bombs or being, suspicious activity, etc., etc. But it's now being turned towards everybody, basically.
Everybody, everyone. Now, and all you got to do is go through an airport in America. You won't do that but once. And but that's all part of what I'm talking about. It's the complete mutation of the human race, and so there's a very big science behind all of this. And I'm not talking to hear myself talk. I've been doing this kind of research and study, for 50 years. So I know what's going on. I know where it's going. I know where it's going to end up. I just don't want to be here when it happens, because when I drive down the street and see the children of the city and think about the young people today, young teenagers today, who are, they're just as human as anybody else, and they have their problems, but I know what's coming for them. I know that they will never know the world that I lived in. When I was born in 1940, by the time I was 8 years old, the war was over. America was a beautiful place at the time. I mean, it was supposedly a free country, and there was no pressure from SS and Gestapo or from the NKVD or the KGB, and the crushing of the human will and the human spirit. There was still a feeling of everybody could do what they wanted to do and be what they wanted to be. And so that feeling was a wonderful world to grow up in as a child. And so I look at my country today and look at the world today and where it's going, and I know there is an overshadowing power on the earth that is so fierce and so awesome that no one in power dares to go against it. No one. Presidents, kings, rulers, nobody will stand up for what is true anymore. Nobody will stand up for it. And of course we don't have to now, because nobody seems to even know what truth is anymore to stand up for.
That's right.
And so I just see the collapse of human society. And when I hear people talking about the new age and the age of Aquarius, I believe that there is something legitimate about that concept of the astrological ages. We can get into that later too.
Sure.
But I don't see the new age of Aquarius, especially, if it's going to happen at all, it's not going to happen for another 350 years or more.
Sure.
Well, we're at least 300 years from the age of Aquarius, or maybe even closer to 400. Because according to the best calculations I've seen, and I mean the better calculations of the different ages, age of Pisces didn't even start till 325 AD. So if you take, 2,160 years, which is the life of an age, 2,160 years from 325 AD, that puts you about 365 or 380 years from now.
Yeah, that's right.
So the age of Aquarius is nowhere near us. I mean, we're just in the dawning of the age of Aquarius, so to speak. But irrelevant of all that, the point I'm making is that we hear a lot about the coming age of Aquarius. It's going to be a wonderful time, and there'll be light and harmony and love. Well, I think you better go back and do your homework, because I don't think that, I think you're totally wrong on that. I don't think the age of Aquarius is going to be very happy. I think it's going to be an awesome, evil, horrible thing that's going to happen to the world called the age of Aquarius. And I see no good coming out of it whatsoever. I see the whole human race being sucked into a darkness that the world has never known before. And the worst part of it is that there will be no one who will even remember that there was any light in the world to start with. So, when people say, about, and we'll need to get into that too, about my interest in New Age subjects and my interest in Helena Blavatsky and Manly Palmer Hall and other people like that. I'm not stupid. I read and understand and study everything. I try to make myself at least conversational and at least intellectually aware of virtually every subject, so that if I'm sitting on a stage talking to someone, I know what they're talking about. Doesn't mean I'm married to them and I live with them. It just means I am aware, intellectually aware of who they are, what they believe, why they believe it. Like the Bible says, study to show yourself approved, so that when you're sitting with intelligent people and they are explaining to you what their view of something is, at least I can intellectually appear to be knowledgeable. I understand what they're saying. I understand why they're saying it. I know where it came from and I know where it's going. And therefore I can show respect and be decent and a gentleman. But I can also speak with some intelligence at the same time because I know the subject. Well, I have found that in America, if you are intellectually inclined, you better keep your mouth shut. Because here, if you don't know anything about basketball or football, you might as well just shut up. Because people are going to see you as an Al-Qaeda agent, or you must be working for the government because you all use all those big words and read all them old silly books. And so, you know, you're not like us, beer drinking bunch of good old boy losers who are unemployed and losing their homes and watching ball games and got an IQ of 40. So you're not like us. You read and think and study too much, and people like you go to prison. And so I understand how people have got a misunderstanding of Jordan Maxwell and think there's something wrong with me because I talk about Helena Blavatsky and I've used her name. But I've used Adolf Hitler's name, and I wasn't married to him either.
Well,
you know,
that's right.
so,
That's right.
You know.
Well, that's a good point as well, and that is one thing I wanted to bring up. You know, regarding your work and your research, and regarding the time we're in now as well, in terms of the internet, when everybody can, you know, have a voice, and that is both has advantages and disadvantages, of course, as well. And we all have to shows and what we want to focus on and so forth as well. But a lot of the criticism that is aimed towards you, Jordan, seems to stem from you know, a few of these points that you brought up here. That you've enjoyed the work of Blavatsky, that you've enjoyed the work of Manly Palmer Hall, and the problem seems to be that these people are obviously associated with Theosophy and Freemasonry. And always when I look at your work, it's the same way for me. I don't feel, you know, I don't agree with you on every single point. I don't align myself in the way to you, but I'm incredibly interested in what it is that you're talking about. And I see that this is the same thing when it comes to Blavatsky and Manly Palmer Hall in your relationship to their work as well. That you know, you don't have to be a theosophist just because you understand the occult and important philosophical implications of the work that is being done.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Right. I don't even know what to say anymore. You know, if you know something, if you've studied something, if you're intellectually inclined to read and study what other people are thinking, or what great political, philosophical, or religious movements, where they came from and how they got started, if you are inclined to want to do that kind of research all your life, so that you can sit with the best of the best and intellectually be on their level, when you know, and I've been invited to sit and be on panels at UCLA and USC, and I've spoken at universities all over the country, and so I realize that if you're going to sit in front of an audience that's a very erudite and intelligent audience, and they're very worldly and intellectually aware, and if you want to defend your position, you had better actually sound like you've got an education instead of a blundering bimbo who's a beer-drinking airhead who's never read anything, never studied anything, don't know anything, haven't accomplished anything, and totally worthless. And a loser, and you're losing your home, and your family's on drugs, and you've got no job, and you're going to criticize me because I've spent my whole life reading, studying, and questioning, and loving wisdom and knowledge and truth. And because of that, I don't sit, and because of that, I spoke about Adolf Hitler, so I must be a Nazi. And one time I gave a lecture and I mentioned Stalin, so I must be a communist. communist, and so people will jump on anything. It is called, the word in the dictionary is called ad hominem attack. An ad hominem attack is an attack on someone's person, on their looks, upon their name, upon their family, upon, to attack them. Because you don't have the brains to sit and discuss intelligently before a large audience anything with them. You can't sit with an audience of 100 people listening and intelligently, and with respect and honor and dignity, one gentleman talking to another and converse with them. You can't do that. You don't have the brains. You don't have the education. So therefore, just badmouth them, their family, their mother, the way they dress, do something to, like the. And so that's what's been coming my way for a long time. People will quickly judge because I am different, because I don't look the same as they do. I don't go to their ball games. I'm not interested in their silly politics. I'm not like them, and because I'm not like them, I must be an Al-Qaeda agent or some kind of a communist or Nazi or something. And especially, I don't love the Lord, and I'm not a born-again, wash the blood of the Lamb, saved by the Holy Ghost, and falling on the floor and giving my money to Benny Hinn and a faithful follower of TBN. So therefore, I obviously don't love the Lord. And so in their beer-drinking ignorance, they then claim that I must be some kind of a radical, maybe I'm a disinformation agent, or I'm a communist, or something. Something's wrong with me.
Well, exactly. And this is what's difficult and tricky when you come from a perspective of occult studies, when you have an audience, potentially then, that comes from this, either from a materialistic, scientific, or as you brought out or highlighted in many cases, a religious background. These things won't really compute maybe in the way that you expect them to, because also people are very egocentric oriented, and they take this as kind of a personal attack, obviously, as well, instead of just
I'd love to be able to do something with this knowledge before I leave here, because there's so much to be told about how the system really works. How the commercial works, the banks, the insurance companies, government, how the entire world system operates, how it always operated. And I'm just amazed at how much people don't know. And unfortunately, the kind of thing I talk about has a niche audience. Generally speaking, people in the country, they don't care, they don't give a damn about any of this stuff. And I've joked about it, that it has nothing, what I talk about has nothing to do with basketball. But in point of fact, that's pretty much true. The kind of thing I talk about, most people are not going to spend 50 minutes, and I've spent 50 years looking at it, and most people haven't spent 50 minutes sitting and wondering about how this government actually works. And I can tell you one thing, nothing works the way you think it does. Nothing. That's a whole story in itself.
Yeah, that's an amazing quote. Nothing works the way you think it does, Jordan Maxwell. And that really is as profound as it gets, and it's 120% true.
Yeah. When you think you walk into a bank and you're going to borrow money from a bank, you don't borrow money from a bank. Banks don't loan money. Period. No, they've never loaned money. As a matter of fact, in the California Constitution, the 1849 Constitution expressly says in English that no banks are allowed to operate inside California state, period. And that there will be no California state tax ever. And in California state, there will never be a state tax ever. That's in the Constitution. Well, today we got, we have something called a state tax. It's not really. It's a federal tax on federal citizenship. And that's a whole other story in itself. So the point I'm making is that nothing is what you think it is. But, we talked a little bit ago about this particular time of year, being the spring and Easter, and I thought it would be interesting for some people who have never heard where our celebrations come from.
Yeah, please. Oh, yeah.
Because the Jewish celebration of the Passover is very, very big in the Jewish community, and almost all Jews, no matter what their political perspectives are, look to the Passover is very important.
Is 0.2% of the world population, Jordan.
Yeah.
And here we are talking about the religious importance of 0.2% of the world population. That's not to demean them in any way, but we have population groups and ethnic groups that are a little bit bigger than 0.2% of the world population.
Yeah, I know, but it's dominant in the Christian countries too, even throughout the West.
Yep.
So,
go ahead, please.
Well, in order to understand Easter or Passover, because they're both the same thing, they both are a celebration of the spring, of the coming of new light in the spring. So it basically boils down to sun worship. One of the ancient pagan worships of the world is sun worship. Let me explain. And the first week of summer, the first day of the first week of summer, the sun is as high over the northern hemisphere as it's going to go.
Okay.
It's not going any further.
We'll go right through the break, Jordan. Don't stop, please. Go ahead. Now say that again. The first.
Well, the first week of summer, the sun is as high in the northern hemisphere as it's going to go.
Okay.
Not going any further north than the first day of summer.
When is the first day of summer? Do we know?
Well, it's what we call the summer solstice.
Solstice, yeah.
And so the first week of summer. Now, the sun is directly overhead. Now, I should go in at this point and say that all of the teaching in Christianity, the entire theology of Christianity, was developed in the northern hemisphere. Christianity has no teaching in it coming from the southern hemisphere. We don't have anything that the Aborigines of Australia or the tribes in Brazil or the Mayans and the Aztecs, etc. All the teachings of Christianity come from the northern hemisphere. That's important, because once you understand that, you begin to look at the idea that the sun, as I said, is as high in the northern hemisphere as it's going to go on the first day of summer.
June 21st.
Yeah, which is, we say that, and the sign, the zodiological sign that dominates the summer is Leo the lion. And so the sun is then referred to as being in the house of Leo, the lion. And so Leo is the lion of the tribe of Judah. In Hebrew, it's the lion of the tribe of Judah, the sun in the constellation of Leo. Now, when he's in summer, he's very hot. We say this guy's really hot. But now, 90 degrees later, and because the sun moves 1 degree each day southward, so 90 days later, or 3 months later, it has moved 90 degrees southward. Now, he used to be hot in summer. Now he's not so hot. Now he's falling, so we call it fall. And now the sun is halfway down. It's going down, so we call it fall. And now 90 degrees later, or 90 days later, again 3 months later, the sun reaches its lowest point in the southern sky. It is now down in South America, and our winter is here. And so the ancient people said that the sun was of little value to them now because the sun is dead, as far as we're concerned. And if you think about how ancient man must have lived, tens of thousands of years ago, it would be freezing cold up here, and there's not much sunlight. And so to them, the sun's dead. It's of no value. It's gone. However, when it reaches the lowest point in the southern sky, which is on December 22nd, it goes no further south than December 22nd. It stops. And for 3 days, the sun rises on the same degree. Even the United States Navy instruments can tell you that the sun comes up on the 22nd on the lowest degree, and then on the 23rd and 24th comes up on that same identical degree. So for 3 days, the sun does not move off that 1 degree, off the lowest degree. So we say that the sun is not moving for 3 days, so it's dead. So God's sun is dead, and of course the sun does belong to God. It doesn't belong to you, it belongs to God, so it's God's sun. God's sun is the light of the world. Of course the sun is the light of the world. And so the
New York Harbor, and one of the most famous, iconic landmarks on planet Earth, the Statue of Liberty. I've been to America many, many times, and to New York many times, and I love the place, basically. I don't like everything about it, but I love coming here, and I've always gotten very, very well with many of the people, most of the people that I've come across. But coming this time, as soon as I landed in America, in San Francisco, through to Cleveland and down to New York, I've just felt a different America, a much more anxious America, a more fearful America, and certainly walking around New York City with the protests at Wall Street and everything, it is a very much more than ever before police state America. When I first came here in the 1990s, I was taken aback by the number of police with guns that there were, and park police that carried guns, and it's like, what's going on? But that was as nothing compared with the police state that America is becoming. Indeed, the world is becoming, but America is certainly leading the way. And America, you know, for me, is such a mass of contradictions. It's so topsy-turvy in so many ways. And even the Statue of Liberty, it on one level has this image, obviously, of being about liberty, about being the flame of liberty. But it was given to New York by French Freemasons in Paris that realized and knew very clearly what it really represented. There's a mirror image of the Statue of Liberty on an island in the River Seine in Paris, and it is the goddess of Babylon, the ancient goddess worshipped by the Illuminati bloodlines that I've been exposing all these years, the bloodline families that are behind this global control system that is behind the kind of police state, emerging Orwellian state that I've just been talking about. And thus, we have an iconic image representing freedom when it represents the ancient goddess of the Illuminati, going back to ancient Babylon and that whole ancient period. And if you look at the way the goddess was depicted, it had the spikes around the head, just like the Statue of Liberty. And the sun god, probably when you look at it, probably the Saturn god of Babylon was Nimrod, and Nimrod was depicted as a flame or a lighted torch, held of course by the Statue of Liberty, and the lighted torch is one of the great symbols of this Illuminati bloodline network. And when I look at America, I see so many other topsy-turvy, it seems to be one thing when it's another. Just over there is the emerging Freedom Tower on the site of the World Trade Center. And it's the Freedom Tower. It's about a representation of freedom, when actually it's being built on land where the two towers stood that were brought down by this very network in an engineered fake terrorist attack. It was a terrorist attack. We're not the kind that they're telling us it was. And that event on 9/11 has been used to dramatically delete freedom in this country through the Patriot Act and the Orwellian state in general that's been justified by that event and others that have followed. What has been justified is a global war on terror in which vast numbers of people, mostly with brown faces, innocent civilians and children, have been slaughtered, justified by the need to react to a terror event just down the way from here, which was actually engineered by the very forces that are now telling us and have told us that they have to go and invade this country or invade that country and delete our freedoms to save us from the people that did that, when they were the people who did that, along with Mossad, and British intelligence would have been in there somewhere. It usually is. And a couple of things that I've noticed since I came to America, and one of them was like brought to mind this week. And there are two of the major programs that hold this country in servitude and have since its creation. One is the God program, where, of course, the early settlers were the Puritans, you know, the Puritans, no laughing, no dancing, no music, no nothing. And that religious program, starting in the early days, right at the start, has come through and dominates the psyche of so many people in this country. It saddens me. I mean, people might not like this, but, you know, speak your truth and take it as you will. But it saddens me to see how the Christian program, especially the extreme Christian program, has gripped the minds of so many black people in this country. When it was the very religion of the slave owners that was imposed upon the slaves as part of the process of suppressing them and bringing them, you know, in control and servitude. And now I see evangelical black ministers and preachers who seem to have learned the art of preaching from the same preacher school, because they all deliver it in the same way, that are Bible bashing and bashing a religion and promoting a religion that helped to enslave the people that were brought over from Africa and so on. I find that so sad, that the control system of the slave owners has been taken over by the people that come from the former slaves. But there's another one, and I've been aware of this since I was a kid, funnily enough, a long time ago, and it came to mind again this week when I was interviewed by someone. I didn't have a very nice experience with him, but I was interviewed by someone who reminded me very, very much of this other program. I call it the John Wayne program. And John Wayne, for people who are much younger than me, was, again, an iconic movie actor in this country. And again, one of contradiction and topsy-turviness, because John Wayne became a war hero in this country, and a national hero in this country, particularly a war hero because he specialized in cowboy movies and war hero movies. He became a war hero while never hearing or seeing a gunshot in anger. While the young people of America were the other side of this ocean, getting killed and killing others in real combat, things like the D-Day landings and so many other combats in Europe in the Second World War. John Wayne was on a movie set in Hollywood having makeup put on before his next scene. And yet he became the symbol of America, as so many people have been programmed to see America. And this is very, very, very important, I would suggest, to so much that's been allowed to happen, and so much that has happened, justified and supported by this John Wayne mentality I'm talking about. John Wayne played basically one character in different situations, usually with a cowboy hat on or a military uniform. He was the good guy. This was the persona. He was the tough, strong, tough guy, but with a heart of gold. He was the man who was coming in, the tough, heart of gold man of justice and fairness, who was coming in to sort out the bad guys. And that, take that to what we're seeing today, and what we've seen decade after decade after decade. Because I hear American politicians and other people in America talk about America standing for peace. America does not stand for peace. Vast numbers of Americans do, individually. But as a country, as a unit, it does not stand for peace. If you put into Google American wars since 1776, and you look at the list of them to present day, it is absolutely staggering. And far from being a government, a military of peace, it's been one of slaughter on an unbelievable scale, one of slaughter of the innocent and acquisition of resources in countries as a result of the slaughtering of the innocent. And this has been justified by the John Wayne mentality. I mean, you just look, you know, go on the internet or something and look at the Obama speeches justifying the pepper bombing of Libya and sending NATO in there, dominated by the American military, the American Air Force. And you will see a John Wayne speech. This is America. We're a country of peace. We don't go into war lightly. But yes, you do. and have done decade after decade after decade. How has this been justified, and how has so many people explained it away and supported it? Because just as Obama justified the slaughter in Libya, it's been basically, we are America, brackets John Wayne. We are the tough guy. We have the big military, and we're the biggest military in the world. But we have a heart of gold. We only want to help people. We only want to protect civilians from these bad guys. We're going in there to sort the bad guys out. Oh, if only John was here now. He is. John Wayne was supposed to have died in 1979. The program that is John Wayne, that is such a, still today, a massive manipulator of the national psyche and the national perception and self-identity of America, is still there, almost as powerful as ever. Instead of going in with his gun and his cowboy hat and going in, you know, is it the Green Berets and all that stuff? The Green Berets was a John Wayne film. You know, go into YouTube and put the Green Berets in, and you'll see the title music sung by apparently a Green Beret, and you'll see the most sickening, grotesque, ridiculously inaccurate portrayal of Green Berets that you'll ever come across. Because this is what it is, you see. I still see it today. I see this, oh, he's a Navy SEAL, he's a Green Beret, he's a Marine. They kill people, don't they? Don't they kill people? And oh no, but they don't just kill people, they kill people to sort the bad guys out. Well, there must be a lot of bad guys in the world, because there's a lot of them been sorted out over the years. And that John Wayne mentality that sees the strong guy going in with a gun, the Rambo, the Rocky, and all these people, the Schwarzenegger. This is all, or are all, expressions of this John Wayne mentality that still has this grip on so many in this country. It's breaking away, it's fracturing, hallelujah to that, but it's still vastly there. And it justifies the most appalling actions against innocent, often defenseless people around the world. And it's happening more and more now, because it's not really slaughter. John Wayne never killed anybody, really, except the bad guys. He was only doing it for fight for good. And that's the way that so many see the American military and the grotesque history it has. Not of protecting people, not of saving the world, but of taking the world down a road, a dark, dark road of mass human slaughter, destruction, and conquest. And so, when you come to America, you meet so many nice people. And it's an incredible country in so many ways. But it's being systematically destroyed, militarily and financially, to bring it under the heel of a world government dictatorship. If you want a world government dictatorship and you want control of the planet over every country and every people, you cannot have superpowers with the financial and military might to say no to you. So ironically, while we're seeing this slaughter, while we're seeing all these wars of conquest, we're seeing the country that's set up to be the fall guy doing them, because, you know, so many of the guns shot by America, symbolically and literally, are actually loaded in Europe with the center of this global secret society network. So America is being used to destroy itself. And you know, every year, if you add in all the costs of the American military, all the hidden costs, this country, when people increasingly are living in tent cities, are losing their homes, are losing their jobs, are losing their livelihoods, this country is spending in excess of $1 trillion a year on the military and overseas acts of slaughter and conquest. And surely it's time, surely before this process is complete, this delusion is complete, that Americans in vast numbers look collectively in the mirror as a nation and say, hold on, have we been had here? Are we really the good guy John Wayne sorting out the bad guys, or are we just using that program to justify the most outrageous, stomach-turning mass murder that is getting more and more blatant all the time? Because until these programs, the God program and the John Wayne program, are deleted and diluted, so many Americans will go on being manipulated to support action that ironically is designed to destroy the country they think they stand for, and to destroy the economy and the military that they thought was the strongest in the world. America is bankrupt. It's absolutely bankrupt. And until people start to realize that it's all been systematically done, then the job will be completed. I know some people might not like what I've said. Really, I don't mind. I don't care. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I just want to say something because I think it needs saying. That is an illusion. And everything that's followed it has been an illusion in the sense of the self-identity of America as it's been programmed to Americans to believe in. And until we kind of take a step back and redefine self-identity of America and see what the game really is, persuading the people that America is the good guy, John Wayne, so that Americans will support this grotesque nonsense and mass killing, then, like I say, the job will be completed. It doesn't have to be. It's still our choice, but only just.